A lot of people make New Year's resolutions. Guilty as charged. I'm going to lose 50 pounds this year. Thanks, Pam. I gained 10. Next year's a little more modest. I'm going to lose 20 pounds. Only gained 5. I'm doing good. The next year, I'm going to lose some weight. And I stayed pretty well even, so that was a wash. But enough about that. I'm just kind of done with New Year's resolutions, actually. Today's a little different. The message I'm giving is different than what I've done before. I come out of a kind of a technical background, so everything was by checklist. Point A, point B, okay, make sure you make this adjustment or whatever. If you're going to compare it to anybody, I call it's going to be different because it's going to be more of a Kevin Kendall message than a Jim Davidson message. Starting with my inspiration for it. It actually came out of a country song. But the country song had such a strong message that it crossed over to Christian music and became a hit there also. Some of you can probably guess what song I'm talking about when I start reading some of the verse that's in it. But the premise of the song is that a man gets news from his doctor that you have a disease or an illness that is going to kill you. You're not going to survive this illness. So, what does the man do? He runs into a friend of his later, not later that day, but sometime down the road, and they're talking about it, and his friend asks him, so, what do you do when you get news like that? How do you handle it? Well, the man answered. His response was, I went skydiving. I went Rocky Mountain climbing. I went 2.7 seconds on a bull named Fu Manchu. I want no part of that. But that addressed kind of his worldly side, where he wanted to be and where he wanted to, even though he was dying, wanted to feel alive. He wanted to do things to make him feel alive. But that wasn't enough. While it covered part of it, it wasn't enough. So then he went on and he said, and I loved deeper, and I talked sweeter, and I gave forgiveness I had been denying. I was finally the husband that most of the time I wasn't. I became a friend of a friend that a friend would want to have. And I finally read the good book, and I took a good, long, hard look about what I'd do if I could do it all again. And then he saw his life. He saw that tomorrow was a gift, not a guarantee. And at the end of all of it, you'll have eternity to think about what you did with it. What you could have done with it, what I could have done with it. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever had that internal discussion? If I only had this limited amount of time, what would I do with my life? If you were told you were dying, what changes would you make? What plans would you put into action that you've had for who knows how long? Maybe you'd ride the bull. Maybe you'd sing a psalm. Bottom line is, we're all terminal. We are all going to die of our earthly bodies, one way or another. Some might consider it lucky that they've been told when that's going to happen. Some of us are like in either James 4:14, why you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? Are you a mist that appears in a little while and then vanishes? Or in 1 Thessalonians, for you know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. You've got the promise you're going to go see Jesus, but you don't know when that's going to happen. The uncertainty. The first part of his spiritual verse was, I love deeper. Now, my original intent in this message was to touch on all three of the things he said. Love deeper, talk sweeter, be a friend would want to have. God put too much on my heart to have all those. So we're covering I love deeper. As Christians, we can tell people of our love. We can tell them that we love them. We can tell them that we love Jesus. We can take them in under our wings if they're new Christians and teach them the way. We can be beside them when they need it. But when it comes to love, we will never say love louder than when we show it. All people look at actions. From a baby to a 90-year-old man. They all look at actions. So I have a little story from the Bible that will cover about 3 points that will illustrate behind it. And most of us will remember this story. 6 days before Passover, Jesus comes to the home of Lazarus. You know, the man he raised from the dead. Well, they are going to put on a big dinner for him. And one of his daughters, Martha, goes about the business of preparing for that dinner. Doing the cooking, making sure the house is clean, making sure there's comfortable seating for everyone. She is showing her honor, her love for Christ in this manner. She wants everything to be perfect for him. I think sometimes we forget that in the story, that Martha is showing her love the way she knows how. And then her sister, Mary, a little different person. She doesn't want to help prepare the meal, clean the house, whatever. She wants to be engaged with Jesus the whole time he is there, hanging on every word he speaks. So, through the story, we know that Mary winds up taking a very expensive jar of perfume and pouring it on Jesus' feet and wiping his feet clean and dry with her own hair. How many people here would give up an expensive bottle of perfume to put on somebody's feet? More or less try to wipe it clean with your own hair. Yeah, I know, Ron, you're challenged. Anyway, so they're giving her a hard time. They're raising Cain. They're saying, look, she shouldn't have done this. She should not have done that. She should have sold that perfume and given the money to the poor. Well, the reason some of the people wanted that was because they knew that if it passed through them as giving, they would get their cut. That is what it's said anyway. Then Jesus stood up and spoke up for Mary, saying, leave her alone. She did this in preparation for my burial. You will always have poor among you. I will not always be here. Through this story, we find that there's 3 ways, steps, whatever you want to call it, to loving deeper. The first is to do the unexpected. And Mary definitely did that. I mean, she took this perfume and poured it on his feet. No one expected Walter Bucksford to do anything unexpected either. Yeah, I did the same thing. Who? But it was a story written by an Associated Press reporter, and it was on CNN.com. And they start out the article by describing Buck as being a crotchety old man, hard to get along with. But every day he would eat lunch at the same place, Luby's Cafeteria. I don't know where it is. I can't talk about it. But he was so hard to get along with that almost none of the waitresses would serve him. There was only one, Melina Salazar. She not only listened to him and served him, she did it every day for 7 years. Then one day he didn't come in. Then she read in the newspaper he had passed. You would think from the description she'd be one of the people that goes, "Yay, I paid my penance now. Glad this is over." Not her. Because kindness to her wasn't a job. It wasn't something you had to do. It was part of her. Always had to do the kind way. Well, a few months later, just before Christmas, his unexpected reward came. A lawyer contacted her and told her that Buck had left her $50,000 and a 2000 Buick. All because she was kind, doing the unexpected. Now I'm going to turn our attention to the pictures we have up on the screen. We've got these, and unfortunately God moved me rather late in my preparation for this. So we got a +1 that I don't have a picture of. But I can describe her when we get to that. The first one on this that we're going to talk about is Bib, Kevin's father. Well, if you knew Bib, you knew he was a prayer warrior. He loved to pray. He loved to say the opening prayer at church. As his cancer returned time and time again, when his strength started going away some, he may stumble getting up to the pulpit to say it. He might lean on the pulpit just so that he could make sure he stood upright. But once he started praying, his voice was steady, except for emotion, and confident, because he knew that's what he wanted to do. He knew God wanted him to do that. I was over at his house one day. I think I had borrowed Kevin's pickup, and you had left it at his place, and I returned it to there. And I just decided to visit with Biv for a minute. And he started talking to me, and he was talking to me about a decision he needed to make that was a really tough decision. And he wanted my input. Okay, so he's a little crazy. But he wanted my input on it. I couldn't think what to tell him. I've never been in that position. So I told him that the only advice I could offer was for him to pray to God and look for guidance. He would direct him how he needed to go. He said, "Okay, can we pray now?" And I said, "Sure, let's do that." So he started, and when he had said what he wanted to say, he ended with, "In Jesus' name." Now, it took me a moment to realize that he meant for me to say something. Well, at that point, I had never been put on the spot like that. I had never had anyone ask me to come into prayer and then continue on the point he had made. I had said prayers, most of them being opening prayer, where you have literally months to prepare for it. Normally, unless you're like Kevin and he just gets it dumped on him. And the reason it got dumped on him was because I was scheduled to do it. So I finally got my wits a little bit. I, to this day, can't tell you exactly what I said, but we stood there and prayed. And then I left. The point wasn't driven home till later on, not that day, but later on in his life. Brenda and I went over to the house to visit him, because at this point he was pretty much bedridden. And when we got there, we realized that, well, we didn't know it actually at this point. That would be the last time we saw Bev alive. Kevin and Vicki were there. And the nurse come in to take care of Bev. And she wound up kicking us all out because of things she had to do. So we're leaving. And as we're leaving, Kevin asked me, like people do, hey, would you guys include Bev and us in your prayers? Sure we will. No problem. A couple of steps later, hey, let's do it now. No qualm whatsoever. And I think Kevin will vouch that prayer will always be in our memories. And I can't look at Kevin right now or I'll break down like Bev. Another thing he taught me, that it's okay to do that. But to me, that point in time, I believe it's when we went from being acquaintances, people we know at church, to being friends. It was that changing. The next thing that you need to do, or the next step, wave, whatever, is to do the unaffordable. Now, that's what Mary did. I mean, I've said expensive jar of perfume. They say it was equal to a year's worth of wages. Hey, Ron, would you spend a year's worth of your wages to pour it on somebody's feet? No? Remember, you're sitting next to Carol. yeah. Oh, okay. Right. Which is what most of us is like. We would not do that. Not under normal circumstances at all. I don't think we could even fathom it. But Mary did. Mary did the unaffordable. You know, but it's not necessarily about money. I mean, Jesus did the unaffordable. He died for us. How many people are you willing to die for? Jesus didn't go around passing out winning lottery tickets. He gave up his life. So maybe it's more about giving your time, giving your attention. Whatever it is, it's consideration. It's about doing a sacrificial thing for someone else. You're going to sacrifice some part of you for that person. It's got to come from you. From here. Not just as a thought, oh, they could use this, let's do this. It's got to be from here. It's got to be sacrificial. And it's got to be to them. It's got to be in their best interest. And at this point, I've got to point out, guys, that doesn't mean that your wife in any way, shape, or form considers a chainsaw an appropriate anniversary present. Just not going to be. But ladies, that doesn't get you off either. Us guys don't think the perfect birthday present is tickets to the symphony. Another one is just not on the mark. But our example here in the church of doing what's unaffordable is Cindy Ware, the lady in the middle. Some of you knew Cindy, and you're going, what did she do that's unaffordable? She was a consummate professional. She had prepared well. She retired well. What'd she do so unaffordable? Well, if you had known Cindy, you know that underneath that professional exterior was an abundance of love for God, for her friends, for fellow Christians, for people in general. So she decided to retire early so she could go on living the rest of her life, so she could enjoy what time she has left. Then she came up to the unaffordable part. Since she had done that to conserve her strength, the next part could be also considered unexpected. She started a support group, a cancer support group, which when she started it up was sorely needed. People were really having a hard time, struggling with the effects of cancer and wanting to stay emotionally, mentally, spiritually strong. Cindy could have easily just kind of pulled back, lived out her days, and then gone on and been with the Lord. But she started this group instead. I don't know about any of you, but I have served on some groups, and it is taxing. It takes a lot out of you. I have never actually started a group from scratch, which is what Cindy did. I can't imagine the cost in her physical being for doing that. But she was strong. She lost some of her strength doing that, physical strength, but shared her spiritual strength. She felt that God had placed her here at that point in time to support people with cancer. She paid an affordable cost in her physical well-being to help others. Of course, Jesus sets the bar for giving the best gift. He not only did the unexpected or the unaffordable, he did it with perfect timing. He didn't want to do it at all. You're going, what? He didn't. Think about it. He prayed to his Father to take that away from him. He did not want to die. But he did qualify it. He said, Father, your will be done. And he went through with it and gave the best gift ever. Now, sometimes in loving deeper, you have to be prepared to do it now. Perhaps doing it now is more of a feeling, is more about feeling and less about thinking. I do believe that you should be prepared to meet that point, because you will never have a second chance to meet a stranger. You will never have, well, I won't say never, you will normally not have a second chance to speak to someone about God. Give your testimony. if you don't know them prior to that. Mary knew it. She knew she needed to do it now. Now, whether she was thinking, I need to do this now, because if I don't do it right now, I'm going to think about my cultural upbringing, I'm going to think about my family, and I'm going to talk myself out of it. Which is what I normally wind up doing if I miss the chance. Or maybe, just maybe, she knew that if she didn't pour the perfume on his feet that night, she would never have another chance to do so, to pay that honor to her Savior. You know, I come back to Judas and some of them really giving her a hard time about it. But Jesus came to her defense again and said, leave her alone. Why do you berate her for doing a good thing to me? You know, you always have the poor. You can help them whenever you want. But I will not be here much longer. She has done what she could and has anointed my body for burial ahead of time. So she did what she could now. Now the next example, worldly example I guess, is my plus one. Now this one, while it was a natural, it was kind of hard because it just came to me yesterday. God wanted me to put this in here because it is a perfect example of do it now. There is a lady by the name of Bonnie who is an unofficially adopted sister of me and my brothers. I won't go into the whole backstory of that, but she came to us rather, actually after my dad had passed, to where she became a true sister. She was always a great family friend before that, but then she became a sister. One day she's at her house, and she still has a landline, no cell phones, and it rang, so she answered it. Lo and behold, on the other end is a telemarketer who goes right into her spiel. Now, most of us would have just said, excuse me, stop. I'm not interested. Please take my name off your call list, and hang up. Not Bonnie. She sat there and listened to this lady, answered her questions. They talked for a few minutes, and the lady wound it up. And then Bonnie, being the most forward person I know about presenting Christ to strangers, goes, okay, I have patiently listened to you. Will you listen to me for a few minutes? The lady was dumbfounded. She didn't know what to do. She wound up going, yes. The first thing Bonnie did was go, do you know Christ? The lady was at a loss. She didn't know what to do. So they talked for a few minutes. Then they hung up. A couple of weeks later, Bonnie's out working in the fields. Her daughter answers the phone. It's this lady again. She's going, I wanted to talk to Bonnie. I wanted to tell her I do have an answer for her. And the answer is yes. I went back to church. I realized that I hated being a telemarketer. So I called my parents to see if I could move back home halfway across the country, and I'd find a job there, something nothing to do with telemarketing. Her parents said, yes, come on home. By the way, a lady had called the house looking for you because she had a job that she thought you'd be perfect for. So give her a call. So she did. and basically accepted the job over the phone. Then went into work, gave her 2 weeks' notice, like a good employee is supposed to do. Went to her apartment, terminated her lease, then called her parents to give them the good news. Hey, I got a job, I can come home. Will you pay for my flight home? Sorry, we don't have the money. We can't pay for it. She didn't have the money. So here's this woman about to become homeless, jobless. You know, for many of us, our greatest fears in life. And she went to work. Her boss called her into the office. She assumed for her exit interview. But he sat her down and said, look, you've been with the company long enough. You have accrued vacation that you haven't been paid for. As you can guess, it was enough to pay for the plane ticket home. So she went home more than happy because now she's working with kids instead of being a telemarketer. All because Bonnie did it now and presented it to her. And because she did it now and acted on it. You know, one of the things I quoted that happens later in the song is, and I finally read the good book, and I took a long, hard look at what I'd do if I could do it all over again. That brings us up to the one on the left. I know, you're not going blind, you're not drunk. It is two people, but I cannot consider one without the other. Other than with illness, I never saw them apart. So, they're more of the example of what to do so you don't have to ask yourself that question. What would I do if I have to do it all over again? Harold also, and most of these examples, probably all of them, would hit more than one of these points, be examples for more than one, because he also showed do it now. By joining this church at a very early age. I'm 65 years old. He joined this church the year my father was born, 1923, at the ripe old age of 11. He did it now. He felt the call. He felt that this is the place God is putting him. Here we are. I'm joining. Then to kind of keeping that tradition, at age 22, he married the love of his life, Thelma. Now, what first attracted me to this couple was actually the physical resemblance to my own Papaw and Mamaw. Papaw was a good solid 6-footer. Mamaw didn't hit 5 feet. But when it came push to shove, you knew who was in charge. And never did it in a crossword. Harold and Thelma was lucky they found each other. They became one, and they enjoyed 78 wonderful, God-filled years together. It was something amazing. To me, their faithfulness to serving God was undeniable. They each had their strengths. They each had their weaknesses. They complemented each other well. But I had gotten put into a Sunday school class because someone left. Pastor asked me if I would step in and teach the class for a while. I said, well, I'll do it as a substitute for a while. So I walk in there, and Harold and Thelma is there. The Doties are there. The Ross were there. I'm going, this isn't going to work. But I went ahead and started teaching the class. And then after a few weeks, come into the classroom, and Harold and Thelma was always there. They always showed up early. And we started talking. So I asked Harold, which probably was a mistake on my part, how he thought I was doing leading the class. Some of you can probably already guess. Harold being Harold, he said, "You still have a lot to learn." He didn't mean it in a mean way. That was just Harold. You ask him a question, he gave you an honest answer. Now, also during that, talking with Thelma, well, actually, let me back up a little bit. Because of the teaching, he really got to the point that he was enjoying pushing me. And this is the part where I found out that Harold had really read the good book more than once, because he would quote book, chapter, and verse to a point I'm trying to make. I hadn't even thought of that book, chapter, or verse. So I'm sitting there with my Bible, trying to get to it before he finished talking about it. And I fanned that Bible so much, I swear that I created a breeze in that classroom. It was just constant. And it wasn't only him, but the whole class was that way. They really prepared for that class. And then also during the conversation, they helped solidify my thought about one point of church. In today's world, if people get upset at church, someone says something that offends them, or they don't like the music, or they don't like the way the pastor gives the message, they look for another church. At that point, we were going through a lot of changes here in the church, so I asked them, "What do you think about the way the church is changing?" It wasn't Harold this time. Thelma spoke up. Thelma said, "We are not crazy. We're not happy with some of the changes being made. More about the way they're being made. But," and this was a big but God put us here. God put us in this church. This is our spiritual home. And we'll leave it when we go to be with Him. And that's exactly what they did. That's exactly what they did. Now, another little tidbit. Since I may have embarrassed Kevin a little bit earlier, I'll pick on Kitsy this time. I spoke with Kitsy about this message a little bit. I was saying I was going to use Harold and Thelma in the message. And she's definitely her father's daughter. First thing she said, "So you're telling me I need to prepare myself emotionally?" And then she went on, and her inner Harold showed up. She said that her parents were both good people. Her dad was a good man. The type of man that once he gave you his word on something, if he shook your hand, you could count on that happening. But he expected the same in return. If you gave him your word, you better come through too. It was wonderful being around those people. So, there you have it. I hope it's not confused you too much. I've tried to give you examples out of the Bible on the 3 steps of loving deeper. I hope that you saw from those examples, from the examples of the secular world, and from the examples of Christian brother and sisters in my life, I hope it brings the point home. I hope it is an example you can look at, use, and look at your life with no regrets. I have purposely not said the title of the song. Some of you probably already know what it is. I'm sure you've heard the song before. But this is the time that we normally issue a challenge. And on your slips, on the back, you have a couple of challenges. And they're good ones. Consider those. But whether you consider this to be a challenge, this message to be a challenge, or whether you make it into a New Year's resolution, it is my Christmas wish that each of you are the same as the subject in the song and say, someday I hope you get the chance to live like you are dying. I hope that for each and every one of you. Thank you.